When the invasion happened, I suddenly recalled a story I'd once been told. A science teacher of mine had gone off on a tangent during class, and it has stuck with me. You know the type of tangent, that few minutes where you get insight into a teacher's head that somehow makes them more of a real person, rather than someone standing at the front of a classroom imparting the same knowledge that they do to everyone else that sits where you're sitting. He talked about what he thought of how humanity reacted to the COVID-19 pandemic. Most of it I already knew, since it had only been 6 years ago at that point, and I'd been 10 when it happened. But having the perspective of an adult, a teacher no less, was fascinating. Because he explained how, from what he had seen, he realized that there were many people out there who were disappointed at the apocalypse they'd been expecting, even hoping for. And perhaps unsurprisingly, as he rambled on for a bit, my mind drifted to my father. At this point, most people know what a prepper is. Someone who believes the end of society as we know it is imminent enough to stockpile everything they can, including, of course, tons of weapons and ammo. My father is one of those. He's not a conspiracy nut or anything like that, which I suppose I'm grateful for. But he watched enough news and listened to enough paranoid people that he wanted to be prepared for the worst, to protect his wife and daughters. I'm not sure how it came about psychologically, but my mother was fine with it. She felt comfort in the fact that if something horrendous happened, her family, her children, would be safe. And sure, it came in handy when we had a blackout after a particularly severe storm came through, or that time we had a boil water advisory. But over the years, I thought a lot about where my dad's head was at in regard to this stuff, and I realized I disagreed. Not about how humanity would be at each other's throats to survive if resources were scarce. That'd happen, all right. But what I would want to do in that case. Maybe it was growing up knowing about the worsening situation with climate change, or watching people elect politicians who clearly weren't fit for the job, or the people in power who swam daily in a comfy pool of corruption. But I wouldn't want to survive in that world. That was what it came down to, I think. Surviving versus living. Anyone can adjust to a change in their world, no matter how severe, but my father's bunker wasn't living. He mentioned a few times that we'd wait for a year down there if the shit hit the fan, as it was known. Then he'd go out scouting to gauge how the dust had settled. A year in a bunker? Really? Maybe it's because I was a teenager, with the whole world at my feet, but surviving wasn't worth it, if all we had as a reward at the end, when we opened the bunker door, was a world where everyone, still suffering in scarcity, wanted to rob or kill one another. I didn't want to survive in a world like that. Or maybe it was just laziness. The idea that fighting back against such a horrible world was a heavy weight to bear, and I just shook my head in dismay that my father wanted to place that on us. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he just figured out, once the world ended, that'd be it, and surviving was all that would be left. Whatever apocalypse it would be, whatever it would have in store for us, my father was ready, but I wasn't. And that's how I ended up staring out the window into the darkness of our small town home's backyard, gazing at the lights in the distance, wondering what to do next. It's what brought back that ramble from my teacher, about how someone who expected a certain apocalypse would be satisfied with none other. About how, for some, taking up arms against their neighbour was preferable to the inconvenience of wearing a mask in public. And I wondered how this would fit in with my father's plans. My parents were both home from work at this point, nearing 7 p.m, and already having had dinner. When everyone's phones erupted almost simultaneously, texts from friends with the occasional video or photo accompanying them, some sinking feeling hit me in the pit of my stomach. The information streamed into us, and my father spoke those words. Everyone to the bunker, now. His voice didn't hold pride, far from it. As much as he prepared for some horrible catastrophe, I know a big part of him hoped it was an overreaction, that he was going with a policy of better safe than sorry. But the invasion changed all that. We all headed towards the basement. My 19-year-old self, my parents and my sister, 4 years my junior. And my father took up the rear but stopped when I did. We don't have time to grab anything, Melody. I don't think I want to go down there, I said quietly. The statement didn't compute. He stared in confusion. What? I slid my eyes from the staircase up to his. Dad, I don't want to lock us behind those doors and wait for the war to end. I don't want to survive. I never have. I've wanted to live. And part of that is knowing what's going on and how to band together in the wake of those things attacking the city. You're a kid, he said emphatically. I'm old enough for the military, I pointed out. His face hardened, and he jabbed a finger towards the basement. Safe now. Talk later. Unable to argue with that kind of logic, I sighed and took the stairs quickly down to the bunker. It happened just as I'd expected. Terseness and adrenaline gave way to exhaustion. Dad spent the first few minutes unplugging everything in a routine he'd clearly memorized ahead of time, to keep everything working when the EMP came through. We listened to the emergency radio broadcast before it cut out, and then stayed up late into the night, worried, scared, wondering if what hit the cities would come for us next. And eventually tiredness caught up to us, and we drifted off to sleep. Then, the morning arrived, and we were still there, still alive. No explosive noises had woken us in the night, and as I sat there on the edge of my cot, I looked forward into my future, and saw nothing but bleakness. How many times could we play Monopoly? How many times could I read the same book? My eyes trailed along the grey walls around me, the shelves stacked high with rations and other supplies, the 3 members of my family my only company. Despite loving them dearly, I cringed at the idea of being trapped in this prison with them. I'm going to go check on the neighbours, I said, pushing myself to my feet. My father choked out a laugh. No, you are not, he said, definitively. I gazed at him for a long moment, taking in his body language, his facial expression, taking in everything I knew about my dad, how strong he was, how smart and innovative, whether it was at his job or fixing things around the house, and I smiled. Dad, you've been a prepper my whole life, I said quietly. You don't think I've ever thought about what I would want to do if something happened? That stunned him, his eyebrows furrowing. You're safe down here, he told me, his tone explaining that was the only thing that mattered. Maybe I am, I said with a shrug. If those things just attack the cities and really big towns, though, how many people are still out there? Tons. He opened his mouth to speak, but I continued. I read a prepper book when I was like Ali's age, I said, motioning to my sister. This guy who had the same fears you do, the reasonable ones, of lack of resources destroying everything we've built and decimating mankind. You know what he realized by the end of that journey? Have I ever read this one? Dad asked. I shook my head. I don't think so, because at the end he realizes that what he's managed to do, in addition to having a great preparedness plan for any natural or unnatural disaster, of course, is build a community. He realizes that hiding away in a bunker is not what he wants anymore. He wants to do what humanity does best. Recover, take stock, communicate and band together. In his journey to find a way to keep himself and the people he loves safe, he formed a community that he didn't want to let go if the worst was to happen. My father stared at me, looking more tired than anything else. He also looked desperate, and I worried he'd take some frantic, absurd action to keep me from leaving. But I knew that wasn't who he was either. Haley, please, my mother whispered, finally speaking up. I don't want anything to happen to you. Neither do I said with a shrug. But I'm not staying down here for a year. It's absurd. And from what we know, they attacked at night for a reason. Daylight should be safer. And information is what we need right now. Right, Dad? I asked, drawing his gaze again. You always talked about that. Intel is the cornerstone to any survival strategy. I've always promised to keep you safe, Hales, he said softly. What kind of father would I be if I just let you run out into a world of monsters when you're safe here? How can I sleep at night knowing I let you out and you get killed as soon as you step out that door? What kind of father would you be if you kept me prisoner? I asked, raising an eyebrow. He took a deep breath, let it out. I'll take a gun, I assured him. I'll keep my eyes open, but I want to check on the Holswiths. They've got 3 young kids, Dad. And the Waltons are older. William needs his nebulizer, and if it was plugged in during that surge, it could be fried. Not to mention he needs electricity to run it. I paused. You prepared all of us for the end of the world, Dad, but I'm not ready for it to end. Swallowing hard, he nodded, slowly. He paused, the silence weighing heavily on my shoulders as he absorbed what I was saying, knowing that I meant every word, and knowing that I'd been thinking about this for a long time. Perhaps almost as long as he'd been thinking about how best to protect his family in the wake of something like this. Lillian, you stay here with Ali, he finally said. Haley and I are going to go scout the neighborhood.